Hello and welcome to another video, and today's topic on your pricing doesn't determine your value. So we've all probably heard that we should be pricing our services at what we're worth. And I honestly don't believe that you can. So in my mind, you're actually priceless from that scenario, and because you all come with something unique, even I do, all of those kind of things, and I actually don't believe that you can put that on a price tag. So obviously some of the common denominators around pricing determination clearly need to be that you make money, right? Because you've got to pay bills, you've got to look after your family, all of those kind of things. However, if you're determining your price on a value scale, then self-value scale, then you need to be very careful, because I think it can get caught up in overpricing your service to the detriment of the potential of people actually paying to work with you and things like that. And again, I think we need to be careful in this day and age. There's, I don't like to use the word competition, but the reality is there are people out there offering something very similar to you. And I'm no different. Like, I'm in the massage industry, so there are a plethora of massage therapists out there that can provide a service that might meet your needs. And hence, as I said, you really can't, your pricing, if you're using that to determine worth, then you're going to get caught up in all sorts of ickiness and all of those kind of things from my perspective, particularly an energetic perspective. If we come from, and again, I don't think we can necessarily completely come from a objective standpoint when it comes to pricing. Yeah, there needs to be aspects of it. As I said, you need to be able to, pay for essentials such as housing, clothing, food, and transport, and all of those kind of things in the background. Another layer of that is obviously if there's something that you need or want on the other side, then that's got to be factored in. I like to think that ideally you've also got some savings for emergency service, emergency needs and all of those kind of things. So there's elements to pricing that need to come into it, but worth should not be one of them. Your worth should not be one of them. And I think that's really important to get clear on. And I think another layer to this conversation that I'm going to bring in here is that your title does not determine your worth either. So for myself as a massage therapist here in Australia, I'm caught in a pretty messy space, right? So we've got the sex workers, sex trade, who call themselves massage therapists, and massage centers that you go to and can end up having, if that's what you desire, probably more from a male perspective than a female perspective, but they offer different endings, shall we say. And so I'm messed in with that. I'm in with beauty therapists who don't offer remedial massage. Hence why in Australia we've coined the term myotherapist, which was trying to differentiate us. But a lot of people don't even know what that is. So myo meaning muscle therapist, right? So instead of massage therapist, to try and differentiate us, yes, we've had more education, all of those kind of things. But a lot of people don't even know what we do and how we do it and all of those kind of things. So again, if we're using our title as a worth strategy, I know there are a couple of people in the myotherapist industry that are now calling themselves clinical myotherapists, and all that does is confuse a lot of people out there as well. So because technically we're all by pretty much trade, we're all clinical myotherapists. So again, I think it was just another term to try and differentiate, and all it does is confuse people. So and again, our industry, as I said, tied in with the sex workers, had us kicked off our National Disability Insurance Scheme, all of those kind of things, because there was this messy bit with prostitution and all of those kind of things. So if I determined my worth as a massage therapist by my title, I'd be easily offended, and I probably would have got out of the industry a long time ago. And the same with pricing. So I think when we come to pricing, I had a conversation recently with a friend, and it was an interesting conversation at that, because they were worried about being seen as too cheap. and I was worried about being seen as too expensive. And again, as I said, I don't like to use the word competition because we all come with our unique offerings and all of those kind of things. But the truth is there are other myotherapists out there that offer similar treatments and all of those kind of things. There are remedial massage therapists who, again, not quite the same, but similar. And in a cost of living crisis, and again, a lot of people don't want to get into that conversation. And yes, the truth is there are people out there with money, but there are also some people who are really held tight by a budget. And we've got to be mindful of that. And again, the truth is that we want to be seeing clients. Like, that's the truth behind it all. Like, most of us don't want to be sitting in an office pretending to be working and not earning any money. So, and as much as I'm not driven by the dollar, I do recognize that it is a fundamental aspect of living in today's world, is that we need money coming in. And if you're, as I said, determining your prices on a worth strategy and all of those kind of things, and that false premise that is around on the online in the online world, pretty much anywhere, that more expensive equals better, I am here to debunk that myth. It is not true. There are perfectly fantastic therapists out there charging less than myself, just as much as there are terrible practitioners charging more than myself. So again, if you want to use that as a strategy to determine your pricing, then be very mindful of where the rabbit holes that's going to take you down. And again, I think an element that we need to come back to is why you're charging what you're charging. So a philosophy under my pricing strategy is I would like to see you more than once in a blue moon. So I am mindful that if I want you to return to see me, then unlikely am I going to price myself at a point of like a one-off session, once a year, right? I do get those clients. I get clients who come only when they're in pain, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, I've taken myself out of that mindset that I need them to return every week, and I need them to, and I never had that. I've never had that philosophy. My maintenance strategy is somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks. And roughly that is a prevention strategy of keeping you in check with what's going on with your body and all of those kind of things. So if I'm wanting you to return at a level of frequency that I believe is health advancing and all of those kind of things, I don't price myself at a point of a one-off session, And again, I've been in the industry 25 years. So if I really wanted to charge my worth, it would be well beyond the realms of a competitive price. So I live in an area where inundated with choices from that standpoint. Have I checked other people's prices out? Yes, of course I have. And I sit probably at the lower end, and some people are surprised by that, but I also honor that the person coming to me is also dealing with a lot of other financial constraints on their dollar. Some would say, don't think of that. Just consider, that's not important. But the truth is, if I don't consider it, the potential is I'm sitting in a room with no clients. So hence why I'm saying it is illusionary and mythical to think that you can't take that into consideration, because I do actually want to work with people, and I do want people to come back, and I do want to see them again, and all of those kind of things. So, and again, there's a couple of things, like in my astrology natal chart, I have no planets in my second house, which is foundationally the money one. Hence, I often will say I am not driven by the dollar. Hence why I also don't see that I need to price my service to my worth. And again, from my human design, I have the gate 54, which can become, if you're in its lower frequency, of only being driven by the dollar. So I can tell you clearly, I don't live in the shadow of that channel. I never have. And again, someone might say, but then you've always had enough. But the truth is, I've always created enough. That's the other element of this, is that I know there's ways that I can bring in more money if I wanted to. I currently only work 2.5 days a week, which is beautiful. It means I've got time to recover after seeing lots of clients, and it's a happy medium for me. I did cut back hours about 3 years ago after I did some renovating for my mother's sale of a house after my father passed away and all of that kind of stuff. I was clearly burnt out. I was struggling to pull up every second day to do 10-hour days and all of those kind of things. So I cut that back, and I'm now in a happy place where, from that standpoint, I get to invest time in doing online stuff. I get time to nurture myself. I get to invest in myself, all of those kind of things. So online learning, all of those kind of things. There's not that pressure to do it at 9 o'clock at night when I feel like I need to go to bed, and all of those kind of things. So, and hence, a price point that I'm happy with, that doesn't, as I said, is in that space where clients feel like they're getting value, because we need to remember that. Like, I'm in a container at the moment that I'm paying off, and I absolutely feel ripped off. Absolutely feel ripped off. The container has changed significantly in the last 4 months. I've got 2 months to go, and I cannot wait until that's finished. Is that how I want my people to see my service? Hell no. And as I said, overpaying for what I'm getting. I know that there are people in the similar container who are paying far less than I am. And I can tell you that peeves me off exponentially. So, and hence why, as I said, when I'm mixed in with the beauty therapy, day spa treatments, all of that kind of stuff, where people are paying well more than what I'm charging for my hour service, then the assumption is that you're only going to go once in a blue moon. You might go when somebody gives you a gift voucher and all of those kind of things. I don't even offer gift vouchers. And so we've got to be, again, come back to the core of your pricing not being tied to your value, an element of value, but not your self-value and not your self-worth. And again, as I said, undertowing some of that is, do you want them to be one-off clients? Do you want them to be return clients? How frequently do you want them to come back? And be aware that when you raise your prices significantly, some are going to be shocked and walk away because they know that you're no longer the provider for them. And it means nothing about you, right? This is the other thing. The element of them choosing you is an aspect of you, but there is also the financial obligation that goes with that. And knowing across the board that in all likelihood they can find someone who can offer you something similar. Does that demean what you offer? Hell no. But remember, they're the ones making the choice, not you. You're informing them of how to make their choice, but you're not making the choice for them. And it's why I don't pressure clients to come back, more frequently than they need to or anything like that. Occasionally I'll come up with when they come to see me and I haven't seen them for a while, yep, I'll say I haven't seen you for a while. Not to make them feel bad, but just to acknowledge that there's been some time between visits, all of those kind of things. Because in massage, another layer to that is you will probably be more tender than you remember if you were doing treatments consistently. So I often say to those people who come once in a blue moon, just remember that every session is probably going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. Those who come in consistently can often sit in my chair and say, I feel pretty good this month until you start poking and prodding. And that's how I like it. Perfect. And that's why I'm saying, there's so many layers to pricing. And hence why you can never, I ideally would wish you never to tie that to your worth. So, or a capacity of value and all of those kind of things, because I think an overinflated ego can also inhibit that capacity to have people come back to you if you are overpricing your services. And so as I said, there's got to be a happy medium in there. There's got to be, as I said, clearly there's an element of where you need to actually be able to pay for everything that you need for your work and all of those kind of things. So in my case, there's towels, there's oils, there's you know, dry acupuncture needles for dry needling, cupping, and, you know, things like that. And then obviously, you know, washing, drying, all of those kind of things. So there's, and insurances and education and all of those kind of things that go into pricing. So be mindful that we actually want to be profitable. It's not about not being profitable, but it's how much money do you want on the other side, and what are you making that money mean? Because I can add that in as a layer as well. What are you making that money mean? Are you making it mean that you're, you know, X type of practitioner, or that someone else is a B type of practitioner, or, you know, that you're better than someone else because of the price you're charging, or, you know, any of those kind of things. As I said, when I go looking at what other people are charging, I'm very mindful to not make it mean anything about me. That's a choice they've come to. I don't know what's informing that choice foundationally. I don't know what they're charging for room rent. I don't know what they're paying for, you know, their oils, their towels, their, you know, washing, all of that, because some people might be getting it washed externally, and that costs more than obviously in-house washing, and, you know, all sorts of things that come into play. And as I said, I'm just talking from a massage perspective, but you put your, you know, swag of needs for your business on that. And if you've got staff, then you've obviously got to pay for staff and all of those kind of things. And the reality isn't, staff isn't just the wage you pay, there's everything else that goes with that. So here in Australia, we've got things like work cover, we've got superannuation, you've got, you know, things like that that add to a cost. So I think I read somewhere recently, I think it was on Instagram or something, where they said a $65,000, you know, employee base wage ends up actually being an $85,000 employee by the time you've paid all the compliance aspects to that. So payroll tax, work cover costs, and, you know, superannuation and all of those kind of things. So remember, there's more to employing somebody than just a simple base dollar rate from that standpoint. So again, there's a lot of things that influence our pricing, and worth shouldn't be one of them. I'll keep coming back to that. Worth should not be one of them. The same with the title you call yourself is not a determinant of your worth. So be mindful of making out that you are something that you're not, because people will feel that. They'll, you know, as I said, they'll turn up once and never again. And that's not to say that they're not doing that, because foundationally we're not a good fit. And I honor that too. You know, I've got lots of clients who might come once and then all of a sudden I'll start seeing them again, interestingly enough, during Mercury retrograde, which has happened to me recently. I've had a few people come back into my world who I haven't seen for years and months. So let's not feel like if they only come once, they'll never come again, because that's not the truth either. So, and again, a lot of that is we've got no control over that. We don't know what's going on in their life. From you know, extended point of view, it's, you know, there's probably a lot going on in your life that you're not telling your massage therapist or anyone else going around, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's, yeah, so as I said, there's more to your pricing, and please do not tie it to your worth, and be mindful of, because again, people's perception of your pricing is going to determine their expectations, right? This is another layer. So if you're pricing your point at the higher end, people are going to be expecting more. And if they don't receive more, then they're possibly not going to be coming back. And again, that's not to say anything about your service. You could be the best practitioner in the world, but if someone else doesn't deem that they're getting value for dollar, then nothing you do is going to make a difference per se. So, because again, we can't control their value perception. We can only control ourselves, what we're turning up for, why we're turning up, and our deeper reasons, and all of those kind of things. So this has probably gone in so many different directions. The conversation was probably meant to simply state, do not tie your prices to your worth. That is the simplest version of it. And recognizing again that how your clients perceive your value also has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. It's like, you know, we hear that statement that what other people think of you is none of your business. This is similar to that. So when pricing, consider base needs first and foremost. Make sure you're covering your costs and extra to pay for food, housing, clothing, all of those kind of things. And then anything that you might want or need on top of that, plus some savings. So again, we need to be mindful, because again, if I raise my prices, it doesn't take much for that to get washed out if 1 or 2 people choose not to show up that week. Gone, done, no benefit whatsoever. So again, there's a mindfulness that needs to be placed in here in terms of how many people do you want to see a week, breaking that down into costs as well. If you want to cover however much you want to bring in per week, or however much you need to bring in a week plus wants, and then spread that out over however many client spaces you have, is one way to do it. If we want to be very practical, take the emotion out of it, which I think is a good idea sometimes, and then consider, as I said, that savings aspect and needing potentially a little bit extra and all of those kind of things. But I think if we can take the emotion worth all of those kind of things, and remember that some people coming back to see you or not see you is none of your business, is probably a good way to price from that standpoint. So again, I'm just bringing this topic up for something for you to be mindful of. And then also, as I said, a lot of other things within these kind of industries is our titles and all of those kind of things, and not making that mean anything about you either. So you can be the best practitioner, all of that kind of stuff, and somebody's going to try and diminish your perception because of where they see themselves. So, and as I said, massage in Australia is a very interesting industry to sit in from that standpoint, in terms of, as I said, the sex work trade and the beauty therapy trade, and because we don't get the same government recognition as, say, physiotherapists, osteopaths and chiropractors. So we're seen as, I could say third class from that standpoint. If we go doctors, GPs, general practitioners, then we go to that allied health practitioner range, which is, as we said, heavily regulated. They can't have testimonials on their websites. They can't, there's so many things in that bandwidth that they can't say, do, and, present. And then we come under that. We're seen as general health services. We do have code of ethics and all of those kind of things. So it's not that there's not those that are present. And then you've probably got, as I said, when we go to the sex worker, they're not covered by any of that by nature. Unless they're looking to get health fund recognition and all of that, then they're covered by that. But generally speaking, they are not covered by a code of ethics, and they are not, which should be concerning for anyone who chooses to go to them for anything other than their sex needs, right? And the same with beauty therapists. They've got their own regulations and all of those kind of things. So again, if I got caught up in that, I would have left the industry a long time ago. There was a period where I considered to become a physiotherapist during COVID and decided not to. One of them was cost, second, for some other personal reasons and those kind of things, but the primary one was cost. So to train at that particular point in time to do my master's was very expensive. So we can't pretend that money doesn't come into decision making, because it absolutely does. But again, it shouldn't be tied to your worth. It shouldn't be tied to your worth. It is, it's a transaction by trade from that standpoint. And again, just be mindful that if you are over, if you're setting yourselves at the higher end, people have different expectations. And, from that standpoint, it's again, just something to be mindful. If that's where you still want to consider charging, then go for it. I'm not here to stop you from doing any of that. I'm just here to present you with a point of view that there is more to setting a price, than your worth, from that standpoint. So I'm going to leave it there. Hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Leave me a comment if you feel like there's a point of view that I haven't considered, or that's opened you up to a different point of view yourself. I appreciate the view, the watch, and all of those good things. Chat to you soon.